Welcome one and all to the third session of day one of faculty development program organized by the KIIT School of Mass Communication. This is Souptik Garai, your moderator for this event. After two fruitful sessions of the day by Professor Vishwajit Das and Professor G. Ravindran, now we have a session by Professor Ananda Mitra, Professor at Department of Communication, Wake Forest University, North Carolina, USA. Professor Mitra will be talking on the topic, coming back to the classroom, the awkwardness of face-to-face teaching. Before I move on to Professor Ananda Mitra, I'll ask Dr. Vidubhushan Das, the course coordinator of School of Mass Communication here at KIIT, to welcome Professor Mitra. Over to you, Vidubhushan.
Hello. Yeah, good morning. So I say good morning because our resource person is in a different time zone. Thank you, Professor Mitra, for joining in the early morning with us. It's an honor to welcome Professor Mitra, an eminent academician from US. Professor Mitra is a professor of communication. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Professor Mitra is a professor of communication at Wake Forest University, North Carolina. His research and teaching interest includes media, technology, culture, data collection, data management, and issues surrounding the Indian culture. And he's a great scholar, and he's a great orator also. In fact, we are lucky enough to have him with us during pre-pandemic days as the keynote speaker in one of the mega large project of our school, that is South Asia Communication Conference. Professor Mitra was present here during pre-pandemic days and delivered his talk from our campus. And it could be great if it could be a normal situation and we could have invited Professor Mitra again to deliver a talk offline. Anyway, thank you, Professor Mitra, for accepting our request and joining with us at the early morning at your time. So without any delay, for the delay, I request Professor Mitra to deliver the talk. And the talk is very interesting. Talk coming back to the classroom, the awkwardness of face-to-face teaching. So hope we all enjoy your talk. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Welcome you, sir.
Sir, you are muted.
Okay, is this better? Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Now we can hear you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation and to be able to participate in this forum at KIIT School of Communication. It is, I remember that lecture that we had in Bhubaneswar. I want to say that was in the winter of 2019, isn't it? Or was it 2018? All these years kind of mix up nowadays. But winter of 2019, I really enjoyed the visit and particularly being in the winter. And as Dr. Das correctly says, the so-called pre-pandemic days, this is sounding increasingly like we are in a war, and I argue we are. It is a war that is going on, and it's a different kind of war. I'm very, again, honored to be here, and I do wish that I can come and visit Bhubaneswar soon in the post-pandemic days, but that's the part of my talk. That's exactly where I want to take you guys today. Just as a little bit of background, I am originally from Kolkata, and I'm increasingly spending my time in Kolkata. For instance, almost all of this year, starting in January, I have been in Kolkata, other than some short periods of time when I came back to the US to look after things here, which is where I am now. And thus, it's not that early in the morning. I'm an early riser. It's about 9 o'clock. It's nice. It's not that, it's quite nice, actually. And thank you for being so kind and putting mine as the last one. Otherwise, it would have been earlier in the morning. I'll be back in Kolkata on July 7th. And so my experience, this is going back to the earlier lecture, which I found absolutely fascinating. I caught the last part of it. The autoethnographic methodology. That's a methodology that needs to be given a huge amount of attention, as our previous speaker very rightly pointed out, because we are far too dependent in our discipline of mass communication or communication in general in the so-called empirical, or not so much the empirical, it's all empirical anyhow, in the so-called positivist mechanism of learning and teaching, where we have to rely so much on numbers, because that has been the tradition of the natural sciences, which we have been forced to adopt. So I'm in agreement with our previous speaker. I'm also in agreement on the autoethnographic part. It's basically saying that data and information does not always have to be coming through very systematic methods of collection, but it's an experiential data. And I'm going to talk today, because there is no data, there is nothing to talk about. There's no research yet about the topic that I've chosen to talk about, the awkwardness of coming back to the classroom. This is relatively new. Nobody has really studied it. There hasn't been enough time to study this yet, given the frantic nature and the frenetic speed at which things have gone. So I'm going to draw in my talk today on my experience in Kolkata over this year, and my experience in the United States last year when I could not travel because of obvious reasons. And I'm very pleased to see that there are at least two people, one person, let me see, Ipshita is here. And I saw a moment ago that Shubinita was here as well. These are two students.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Shubinita is there as well. These are two scholars with whom I've become very involved in some of the work that I've been doing in Kolkata, and they're doing in Kolkata, and that'll all be part of the talk. So that's basically the background. I teach at Wake Forest. I teach. That term is the key term nowadays. What exactly is teaching? So my lecture, if you want to call it, is going to be more narrative than anything else. And how much time do we have? Does this go till about 7:30?
Yeah, 7:30, including the Q&A session. So if you can
Perfect.
go up to
Perfect.
7:20.
Yeah. So if I usually my conversations with the group is rather, it's broken up by questions. I invite you to ask questions, and I would ask you questions. Your response would actually help to move this along. So let me tell you a story. Back in the March of 2020, I had gone to Kolkata, as I always do, and I came back to the United States right around the middle of March, and it was in the middle of the spring break of American colleges. Many of you are familiar with that holiday, perhaps, that happens around March, when students would go off to their homes or on vacations and so forth, and then we would come back and regroup, and college would start again. Except it didn't. In the March of 2020, Wake Forest University, along with numerous other universities, including those in India, across the globe pretty much, why only universities, of the entire high school system, the elementary school system, everybody suddenly went online at a drop of a coin. We were told that, look, students are not coming back. We cannot take the risk. The university is shut down. You cannot even come to your office, we were told. We were given a single day in which to go to my office, collect whatever I needed, and then for an indefinite period, assume that I'll be working from my basement. I'm going to uncloud my background. Let me uncloud my background a little bit so you'll see. This is my basement. This is where I have been for the past, 1.5 years, from March to now. Either I've physically been here or I've been physically in my home in Kolkata, in either one of these two places. This is my office, as is the case for many of you who are is there anybody in this room who's actually in an office right now? Show of hands, or you can just unmute and say, in your office. Wow. No. Amazing. Isn't that a moment where you say, this has been going on, and for you, this thing has been going on since March 23rd, 2020, isn't it? That's when we went into lockdown, the first lockdown, the national lockdown, right? We just stayed home. We lost touch with our office, and we have argued over and over again. I've heard this in my Senate meetings. I'm on the Senate at Wake Forest, and in my faculty meetings, that we don't get to connect with our students. We want to go back to that, like Dr. Das said, the pre-pandemic days. We hanker to go back to those days where we'll see our students. We'll be face to face, mask to mask. So Wake Forest, the story of Wake Forest was from the March of 2020, Wake Forest decided we are going to be online, and all through the remainder of the spring semester of 2020, all through the summer sessions of 2020, we remained online. And then in the fall or autumn session of 2020, Wake Forest said, we're going to try face-to-face, not face-to-face, mask to mask, distant, which was an absurd idea. I shouldn't say that. I work for Wake Forest, but this was the argument that was made by many American universities. And why did we make that argument? This is a question we need to think about a bit. Why did we have this urgency to go back into the classroom wearing masks? And I taught that way. I taught in a room where there were 9 students distanced away. I'm in a mask, they're in masks. Why did we do that? There's a question that's going to come back to us when we actually decide that we have won over COVID, which by itself is a very tenuous decision, as we have learned in India just over the last 2 months. In January of 2021, there was famously being said that we have won over COVID, we have beaten this, we've done this, and bam, starting April 20th, we were not at all close to winning over COVID. If anybody follows, and I know Ipshita and Shubhinita follow this, I've been writing about this autoethnographic writing. I'd be happy to share my writings with you. We were not even close to beating it. But we do almost always want to go back to that space, go back into the classroom. And I would agree that there are some values. There are indeed many, many values. But it seems to me that it is a mistake to not take the lessons of what we have done since the March of 2020 and completely erase that from our minds and jump back into the classroom as we plan to do all over the United States in most universities, starting in the end of August 2021. Classes are back. Students are back in the classroom. No mask because everybody's vaccinated, which in itself is a myth. It's not everybody that's vaccinated, but we'll have to go back. What is the awkwardness? Is there an awkwardness in that? My first point of the awkwardness is the awkwardness of returning to something from which we could have released ourselves. This could have part of it bothers me. We have an opportunity and we are giving that up. What is that opportunity? Opportunity is to reassign and rethink, for example, the relationships of power between the student and the teacher. Let me talk about that first. Imagine your classrooms. All of you have taught in classrooms. What do? You stand in front of us, in front of the room. The students are facing you. You are usually in a slightly raised position, perhaps behind the podium. It's the proscenium classroom, the classic theater, right? You are acting. Teaching is performance. You're performing as a teacher for the students. Automatically, you're in a position of power. Automatically, students who choose not to engage are in the back seat. Many of us have been the back seater in college, in school. There's a certain degree of comfort in being in the back seat, right? In the rear rows of the classroom. Now come here, where we are right now. There's nobody in the back seat. If I has requested all of you to turn on your cameras, which I'm not going to do, there might be many technological difficulties with that. All of you, if you turned on your cameras, everybody's in my face. I can see every one of you. You know, I am in no position of power necessarily. I am no longer at the top of the room. I'm sitting with books and glasses and bottles behind me. I don't have that sense of, oh, I am the teacher. I am the know-all. I'm not. I am the facilitator. I am the one who can see all of you. You can see me just as you can see. Right now, I can see on my screen, Dr. Dash and SG. I don't know your full name, but I can see SG's camera. Who else? Nobody else. Now, that is an interesting moment, isn't it? It's an interesting moment because I make a presumption that you guys are actually there. That days of taking roll call is gone. All right. We now know, well, here is somebody whose name is on my screen. If I look at the list of participants, this person is there. This person has turned off their camera. This person has turned off the sound. They probably just walked away from the screen, and this is being recorded. We'll come back and watch this in our own time. Imagine how that has shifted the position of power. As a teacher, we wielded that power. We said that, look, if you're not in class, you will be punished in some fashion, right? Today, we are saying, it doesn't matter. If you're not in class, that's your problem. Because you will be punished because you didn't get the information. But that punishment doesn't even exist because we are recording this and we will give it out. Does that change learning? My experience, and this is where it's autoethnographic, my experience is, yes, it does. It allows our students, whoever we think of students, you're not my students by any means, but it allows the people in the conversation to go back to the conversation. This simple act of recording that you're doing. How many of you who are teachers will be comfortable standing in front of that room and all the students have their phones out and they're recording your lecture? Let me ask you that. You've been teachers for a long time. How many of you said, this is totally fine? Take your phones out, record the whole lecture. You can even videotape me if you want to. I'm going to pause for a moment. I want to hear your reactions to that.
Yes, sometimes students do that. And in many Indian classroom situations, I can share some Indian classroom situations. In some classroom situations, teachers don't teach and they sleep. And students take camera and record them. Right.
That's a different reason.
That's a different thing. No, at least for one, I'm sorry, I for one wouldn't be comfortable if my students were to record me, while I'm in the class. And I'm also very cautious. You just have to raise that point. I'm very cautious whenever I take an online class, a class online. Yeah, I have to prepare at least 3-4 times so that because it's getting recorded.
And since last March, we record all the classes in our school. We record all the classes.
Who owns that? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Like it becomes more challenging, I would say, if we were to deal with topics which were, let's say, a little controversial in nature, and how politically charged certain universities are in India, at least. I'm not sure about abroad. In India, at least. So it does make us feel a little conscious of what we are saying, and because I cannot take back my words. Once it's out, it's out. So
notice what has changed. You see the change when you go back to the classroom. You've regained that power. You have suddenly regained that. Students can record you. You can probably say what you want. Is that a loss? Is that a gain? That's the question. I don't know the answer. There is no data to answer that question. Will teachers be feeling more? Will teachers be happier in a situation in the classroom we are no longer being recorded? Or are you better off in this? What is it for the students? Students would love to record you, won't they? They can actually see, Dr. Das just said, some teachers sleep and thus they're recorded. That's surveilling the teacher and getting some accountability on part of the teacher that, look, you got to do your job. You're not, I'm recording you sleeping. Look at the other end of that. The students could sleep in the classroom. They could put up their phones, put it on the desk, put their feet up, if so-called, and not pay attention to you at all, which I would argue, perhaps some are doing right now, whose pictures we can't see, right? Does that bother me? It doesn't, because that part position has changed. It's your responsibility as a student to pay attention, right? As a student to take on that responsibility, which we can do in this space. We do not do that in the real space. So that awkwardness remains. The issue of power and the way in which we will negotiate this return. The second thing that I would say is I need to know your full name. You're called SG on my screen.
Sir, I'm a moderator for this session. My name is Souptik Garai.
Souptik?
Souptik, that's right. I'm from
Kolkata. From where?
Kolkata.
Okay. So as Souptik says, and I'm just using first name, as Souptik says, there is this question of, I think you said, the question of preparation, right? How we would prepare for this lecture, how we would come into this lecture with, and Dr. Dash asked me yesterday, do I have a PowerPoint? I said, no, I don't have a PowerPoint, because PowerPoint will take away from the actual conversation. But the PowerPoint was a mechanism in the classroom, right? It is so much easier to do it over here. You can hide behind the PowerPoint, as many teachers have learned to do. And that is not teaching. I would argue in some ways, this is more engaging. because I can actually see your faces. Just imagine that I can see your faces. If you turn your cameras on, I can see your faces. And I actually make my students do that. They hate it. They absolutely hate it, because I teach, for instance, a class last semester. I was teaching a class that started at 6:30 in the evening and went till 9 o'clock. Imagine 6:30 to 9 on the screen. That's absolute horrifying. That is a horrifying experience, to be on the screen for 2.5 hours. And I made them put their cameras on. There would be kids who were sitting in their sofa eating dinner, or eating, and I'd say, no, that's not allowed. And then I started to realize, no, that is allowed. That has changed. There is a comfort zone that we have discovered. It is okay for me to be sitting in my basement and drinking my coffee and doing this. Okay, those relationships are changing. The student-teacher relationship has fundamentally changed. And consider this, and this is something that worries me. So this coming semester, in the fall of 2021, I am supposed to be teaching a course which is called a first-year seminar. A first-year seminar in the American system for the undergraduate students involves students who have just entered college, right? These are 18-year-olds. These are kids. They've just come from their homes, they have entered college, and they will be taught by what is called a seasoned teacher. I don't know how seasoned I am, but a seasoned teacher in a topic of my choice. I just realized something, that these students were coming into my classroom in September, in the end of August, have not been in a classroom for the past 1.5 years. Does that make sense? They've graduated from their high school, from their class 12, without being in a classroom for nearly 1.5 years. We are now putting them back in the room. And we are wanting to do that without considering, did they actually enjoy the out-of-classroom experience? Sounds like an out-of-body experience, but out-of-classroom experience. Was there something that they got out of that we would lose when we just bring them into the classroom and ask them to go back to a way that is the pre-pandemic way? Where else is the awkwardness? The awkwardness comes from a relational aspect of how we relate with the students. I'll give you examples again. And again, as I said, this is autoethnographic to a large degree. Right now, I'm teaching an online class. We meet every day. In the summer session, we meet every day at 11 o'clock in the morning, over here, for about 1.5 hours. Here's what's interesting. I chose to teach this as an online class because I wanted to keep my freedom. What is that freedom? As a teacher, I have the freedom of teaching it from anywhere. Space has disappeared. Place has disappeared in this new way of teaching. From January through the end of May, January through end of May, I was sitting in Kolkata. I was teaching 3 different courses at Wake Forest, all online. Place didn't matter. Time mattered a little bit, like it did this morning, and Dr. Dash's kindness to put me in the last one helped me to do this in the morning. I was teaching at 4:30 in the morning, sitting in Kolkata. Place has disappeared, and with that disappearance, what did disappear as well was that relational aspect. I could not connect with them, perhaps because I'm still stuck in the pre-pandemic way, where I would actually be able to talk to them, see them face to face. So this continues in the summer, when I'm physically in the United States for a few weeks. And I said to my students, guys, where are you guys? Where do you live? Most of them said, we are on campus. We are on campus, but we are choosing to take your class online. I said, this is great. We do the instruction in the room, in our Zoom room, but hey, let's get together for a cup of coffee. Do you see where the relational aspect changes? We now meet in the classroom like we are doing right now at 11 o'clock in the morning, but last week, I said, 5, 6 of you come over to our coffee shop, which is open on campus. Let's sit down and chat. We chatted, we got to know them. Do I get to know my students in the classroom when I teach them day to day? Because we are involved in that pedagogy, right? We forget that we could do that at another place. And there is no incentive to do it because I see them every day. See them. Do I talk to them? Do I interact with them? Do I get to know them? No. I do my work here, the teaching work, but now I will meet them outside of the classroom. That's where some of the learning also happens. They get to know me. They know that I'm a human being. I'm not just a box on the screen. All right. I buy them a cup of coffee. We eat a donut together. That relational aspect comes out of the hybridity. So the opportunity is not to say, all right, we're all going to work from home. Students are no longer going to come on campus. No, that's not the answer. Students are going to be on campus. If it's a what do you call them, residential campus, as most campuses are in the US, they will come to campus. Most students in the American system, in the 4 years that they are on campus, there is a percentage that they'll find their life partner while being on campus, right? They'll fall in love, they'll get married eventually. You think that's not the purpose of college? To some degree it is. You know, college is the place you socialize. Think back to your days in college. What did you actually enjoy in college? I have thought back to that. I went to IIT Kharagpur way back in 79. I started at IIT Kharagpur. I was one of the last batches of 5 years of engineering. 5 years stuck with the guys in the dorms in IIT Kharagpur, right? What did I learn? I do not remember a word of chemical engineering, which is what I'm supposed to do, right? But I did learn how to relate. Campuses teach us that. That happens outside the classroom, right? I would say that use this opportunity, use the hybrid model. Students will learn through these recordings, students will learn through these screens, but use that hybridity to bring in something else instead of completely reverting to that pre-pandemic days. It is as if, as I see the planning going on in American higher education today, or even in American K-12, K-12 means kindergarten to class 12, it is frantic return and saying that, look, we got to get back, we got to get back. That seems really awkward. And I keep repeating myself, are we not going to acknowledge the fact that we did go through an amazing crisis in human history? Nothing like this. Think about your generation. Some of us are in the same generations, but we kind of vary in that distance. We have not seen anything like this before, right? And we don't even know if it's over. All right, so we are now rushing in and saying that, yeah, we'll get back. I don't know if this is even going to be holding, you know, the Pfizer vaccine and so forth and so on. And now they're talking about the Delta variant and the Kappa. They're going to run out of Greek letters very soon, the rate at which this is going, right? So we are going back and saying it's the pre-pandemic days. I am really troubled by that word, that terminology that has become a God term in our culture today, the pre-pandemic. Why don't we think about a new post-pandemic way of doing things? And we are not, see, the place where we're not doing it, and I'm going to pause for a minute and ask you guys, I know we are not doing it in higher education in the US, at least in certain major places of higher education. We are, however, doing it in commerce and business. Companies are saying, stay at home, work from home, all right? Or at least a portion of the time, stay at home and work from home. That is creating some debate, but nevertheless, people are realizing that, you know what, there is an advantage. There is a way in which this can be perhaps leveraged for commercial reasons, and the commerces will do that. Give you one example. During the pandemic, and I'm a little bit all over the place, but this is part of the chaos of this pandemic, perhaps. During this pandemic, starting in October of 2020, I have traveled to India probably 4 times. People look at me and say, are you nuts? Are you crazy? You travel during the pandemic? I say, yeah, I do. Airplanes are empty. Airports are empty. There's nothing more comfortable than this. I'm going to fly out on the 4th or 5th, this 5th of July. I looked at the seating. The aircraft is empty going to Delhi. I can sleep on the plane, stretch out. I'm not saying that's a good thing to celebrate, but the fact is it's happening because people are not traveling. Business travel has almost totally disappeared, not because businesses, not just because of the restrictions, because businesses are realizing we don't have to. There's a huge amount of money being saved, and that circles it back to money. Universities in the United States are so eager to return to that pre-pandemic days, partly because the infrastructure is so vested in that residential model. Students have to be on campus. Those amazing buildings that have been built as dormitories need to be occupied. All of the student-centered things need to be used. And my point is, yes, bring them back, but offer them the opportunity to learn on their own terms. Learn on their own terms through things like this, the synchronous, this is what we would call synchronous online, right? We are all here. Hopefully we are all here. Those without pictures are probably not there, which is, I mean, either really or mentally or physically, I don't know where they are. I particularly don't care because they can watch the recording, right? So bring them back on campus, but also give them this opportunity. And from the teacher's perspective, does this help you? Would you like to go back to a situation where when it opens up, you would say, I'd like to continue to do that? Just curious, how many of you would say, I'd like to do this? I'd like to continue to teach online. Knowing full well my students are on campus, I can go see them when I want to. Give me some sense. I'm just curious. This is data collection.
You may unmute yourself and answer if you may.
Sir, I think that after almost 2 years of online classes, I would love to go back to campus. I would love to interact with the students. But of course, I also wanted to make it a point when you asked that, would you like to record yourself? Yes, sir, we need, as a teacher, we need to understand that even students are evolving. They are a different people, means they are more comfortable with technology. And if many times I have felt that it has helped me a lot, because before pandemic, since last 5 years, I was using blended mode of teaching, means I was also using Moodle, and I found that there are many students who are shy in the class and they are not saying anything. They are writing it well, they are posting videos, they are doing assignments, and they're taking assignments much seriously when they are posting it on Moodle, because they know that there is a fixed deadline and nobody can change it. So we need to understand the nature of the students, their requirement also as a teacher. And that is why I'm telling that it is very important that they pay attention, whether they are recording it or not, because many times when we compel them that, okay, you have to take note, in taking note, they forget to listen. And that is very difficult at that time, because my purpose is being defeated as a teacher. So that is why I would love to go to campus. I would love to interact with the students. And that is why, since you told us that we need to understand students much more, and that is why we have in our university, we have actually have this provision of having a picnic in each semester, an educational tour, where we go out, spend time with the students, we understand them. And it's not only a very mechanical environment and teaching environment in the university. So I'm very much agree with you, sir, that we need to evolve as a teacher, and we need to understand even the capacities and the interest of the students also.
Others, yeah, I agree with that completely. And that actually takes me to the second part, or the other part of my conversation with you today, which is indeed the students. We've been looking at it from the teacher's perspective so far. I'm talking about the power relationships. We are talking about how we would like us to be recorded, or what our teaching style would be. But you're so right, and I can't catch, Dr. Kumari or Archana, you're so correct in saying that we need to go back to the students. We need to, and I started to say that a little bit when I said, I am kind of curious to see how my students will be in August, end of August, when I have these 18-year-old boys and girls in my classroom, in my face-to-face classroom, who have been sitting in front of a computer for the entire time for the last 2 years. How will they react to me? What will they feel that, geez, I have to dress up. I have to, go into the room and be there. Obviously, this is also on time, be there and perhaps interact in a different way. I can't turn my face off. Imagine that for a second. There's so many of us here who have turned our faces off. Ipshita just turned her face off, that face disappeared. That is impossible in real life. You cannot disappear in the classroom, right? And if you're not disappearing in the classroom, you are always you're always interacting with the teacher, perhaps in a negative way at times, but you cannot disappear from the classroom. Here, you could and leave me with the impression that you're still paying attention. And I would not be offended if you disappeared from my screen, but I would be incredibly offended if you put up a book in front of your face and held it like this in the classroom, right? Return to the classroom. These kids, as you rightly said, Archana, these kids are trained in a different way. I'll give you another example. This is where the American system and the Indian system is so radically different, I would say. And I'm going to ask you certain things, but I'm going to tell you about my experience. I have a kid, a grandniece, and she goes to school. She's probably in third or fourth grade in Kolkata. For the last 2 years, this kid has been going to school online. Like many, if you have children, many of your children are doing that. And here's what I found to be fascinating. They are not allowed to turn their cameras off. And two, they have to wear an uniform. Can you imagine that? That discipline has been, so here, and I think that's admirable. You know, these kids are still interacting in a different way, but they're wearing the uniform, right? They can't turn it off. That is the hybrid that we are looking for, where we bring certain things of the real, of the old real, bring it in. Now, when these kids go back to school, that's going to be an interest. I know this is a teacher development, faculty development program, and we are all college faculties and college teachers, but you got to remember that there are a huge number of children in schools who have experienced exactly what our college students have experienced. How will they come back to the classroom? What is the challenge that they will have? What is the challenge the teachers will have? See, the teachers, think about a K-12 system, and we call it a K-12, kindergarten to 12. Do we have to deal with discipline? If you have friends who are teachers in the K-12 system, all of a sudden discipline disappears. You know, you remember how in school there used to be pin drop silence in the classroom? Now you just you mute it off and you have pin drop silence. You don't have to police the thing. The policing part of it has disappeared. What do students do then? Are students policing themselves? Are students starting to discipline themselves? And to some degree, I would argue that's what it is. I see it in my students, where I see that, they may not come to the class, they might turn the picture off. But when the performance analysis comes, when you do the assessment, let's look at the assessment. And this is something I'm telling my administration over and over again. Look at the assessment. Are they learning better? What is the purpose of this whole endeavor? Okay, do the kids go away and learn something? After the end of the semester, can they answer certain questions, not necessarily in a test or an exam, but go out in real life on screen and say, I know how to do certain things. And I'm going to point to it's two people here who I absolutely admire and very proud of, Ipshita and Shubhinita. The two of them are doing things in Kolkata with, so just as a background, I was in Kolkata during the peak of the second wave, and I got very involved with working the phone and WhatsApp, trying to find resources for people who needed some help with COVID. And I realized I can't do this on my own. And so in a manner, Shubhinita and Ipshita came forward along with another young lady, and we worked online. We still work online. I haven't seen them. I've seen them a long time ago, but we are working online and they're doing a bang up job of answering phone calls and doing things. Why can't we continue that? Why can't we keep that thing going where you are now training yourself to be self-responsive, to self-assess and decide that, look, if I want to get something out of this, I got to do it myself and with the facilitation of the teacher, and the results will come in real life. So how do we assess this? The assessment so far has been so based on the classroom experience that our assessments might need to change. I'm not sure what the answers are to those changes, but to imagine that we will not change, to me, it seems like a mistake. And that's the premise of my whole argument. And this argument I've been writing about, I've been presenting at different places. We really need to go back and self-introspect a little bit and decide what did work and what did not work. What did work, I would say, is in my assessment of my students, when I give them the quizzes, when they write their papers, I'm starting to realize, they're doing better. They seem to have gotten the stuff. Not only because they were in this room on Zoom, but they had the recording perhaps. We put them in little rooms or, small groups, and they probably talk to each other more online than they did in real life, right? So we need to go back and examine that. We need to talk to our students, going back to Archana's point, we need to go back to our students and ask them, what did you get out of that experience? If the universal answer is nothing, which I really doubt would be the answer, then we wholeheartedly revert back to that old days. But if part of the answer is, look, guys, keep this, guys being teachers and administrators, keep these things there, that really did help us. And the simple thing, and this is going to be, it's going to be a showdown in the classroom. As, Dr. Patro said just a moment ago, that you would be uncomfortable with somebody recording your class, or as Shokot, I think I may be getting the name wrong, said just a moment ago, that you can't say the controversial things in classroom if you're being recorded. Well, what happens if the student said, I want to record you? for a place like my university, where the students pay an inordinate amount of money to go to school, and they tell the teacher, hey, you know, I gotten used to recording this. I want to watch this in my own time. I got to do, imagine this in your classroom. And this is happening, by the way, guys, this is happening all the time. There could be, I'm going to take a person whose camera is off. Who's Dr. Rajesh R? Is that our Rajesh? I don't know if that's our my friend from Bardwan University.
It's not, sir.
Okay, anyhow, let us take anybody whose camera is off. Why is the camera off?
Is Rajesh Das.
Rajesh Das, yeah. Let us say the camera is off. What is the person doing behind the camera? Perhaps if it is a student, and I know this was happening, if a student had a homework due for the next class, they would turn this camera off and do the homework for the other class, so they are ready for that class, right? Imagine that in your classroom. Here is somebody put the camera right in front of there, taken out their biology homework in your journalism class, and they're doing the homework. You'd go berserk. You'd say, what the heck? This is disrespectful, right? Student says, no, we did this all the time. The last 2 years I was doing it. I want to continue to do this. This is how it's working for me. Awkwardness. That's an amazing moment of awkwardness for you as a teacher. May not be for the student, since I'm used to it. I did this. I need the ability to do it again. Ask the students, would you want to do it? All right. Ask the students. I am going to teach a class from 6:30 to 9 o'clock at night, starting in end of August. I'm going to ask my students, hey guys, do you want to meet in the room maybe once a week, twice a month in the room? I teach once a week, every Tuesday night at 6:30. Let's meet for the first week in the classroom. Next week, do you want to just stay at home, have your dinner, and get back on the screen? What do you think my students would say? 6:30 to 9. I'm going to put money on this, and they'll say yes. Let's do some of this online. What happens when they say that? How does the administration of the university respond to that? Say, no, you can't do that. You have to be in the classroom. This have to be. This words that pre-pandemic, you have to be. I think that's what needs to be questioned. That's what is up for grabs. There is the notion of have to be in academia has been called into question by this pandemic. And if we don't answer that call, we might actually be doing a disservice to both our students and to us, because we might be losing that opportunity to learn from this. So with that, I'm right at 9:43 meaning it's about what, 7:15, right? Yeah, 7:13 over there, 7:15. Yes. So I'm gonna pause here, and then in the last 15 minutes, you said 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, I want to listen to you guys. It's not that I know anything better than you do. I've just experienced the same things that you have. I've just described my experience and my takeaways from this. And I think I've covered all of it. Talked about equity. We talked about role of the teacher, power, role of the classroom, how the classroom is designed. I like my classroom to be designed in a different way. I might tell them that, look, I don't want any back seats. Everybody sits in the same row in front of me. All right, so everybody's face is right in the front, like right here. Imagine telling that to your administration and say, I want my classroom to be designed in the way I'm used to, so that I can actually pay equal attention to everybody. Amazing, absurd. We go back to the proscenium. We go back to being performers in front of the students who perhaps don't even want to be there, but they're forced to be there because they can't get the recording. They have to be there. Think that through, guys. I mean, that's my only point. And as I say this over and over, my administration starts to hate me because they say, this guy is trouble because he's saying things which are impossible to do, but I'm also saying things which might be necessary to do. Let the kids be on campus. Let them have their campus experience. As now, KIIT, is KIIT a residential campus? Is it completely residential? No,
Mostly.
Mostly it is
mostly residential, right? So the kids are on campus.
We have day scholars.
There are some day scholars, right? But what would you say, what percent of the KIIT's population, student population, are residential?
I would go with more than 90%, easily.
80?
More than 90% are residential, I would say, approximately. I don't have the data, but more than 90% I would go with.
residential.
Only people from Bhubaneswar and Cuttack, they are the day scholars. Otherwise, because we have students across the country and abroad, so maybe more than 90% students are hostelites.
Okay, okay. But if there is a lot of residential students, you have to observe and see what they do. The residential students are doing a lot of stuff that is outside of the classroom, and those things can go on. All I'm arguing for is take the classroom and reimagine that, as Archana rightly said, and Archana seems to have been doing that already from her description, in that hybrid fashion, in that mixed fashion, where you bring in the values of both and not just say that one is one. So what has been said more and more and over again is this online teaching has been imposed on us because of the pandemic. This is the general position that most academics take. This is something we had to do, like I had to do in the March of 2020. You have to go online. This is the only way. And everybody seemed to hate that initially, right? Because it was imposed on us. And now that we have gone through it for nearly 2 years, 1.5 years, I would say, well, it was imposed, but we learned something from it. To give that away is a mistake. So I'll close with that. We still got about 15 minutes. I'd really like to hear from you. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them if I can.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I have to share something. In fact, our students are very liberal. In fact, our structure is very liberal and very pro-student campus. And it's a pro-student campus. And you can understand it. The name of our hostels are Queen's Castle and King's Palace. So it's too liberal in that sense. And many of my students do many activities during the class time. So even we have a very beautiful rose garden next to our building, where there are more than 62 varieties of roses, 2 acres of land of rose garden. And sometimes we take our classes there also in the rose garden. Okay. That is not my worry. My worry is how I will go from this new normal at present to the next normal. Because nowadays, for last 2 years, I'm taking my classes from my bedroom. After each class, I take 10-15 minutes rest. Then I take another class or do office work. So that is a huge challenge for me, not for my students. So from going back to,
yeah. And I agree with that completely. And that is why we need to rethink. You do not have the opportunity anymore. You are actually back on campus. That's what you're being forced to do. That's what, not forced, that's what is being expected of us, right? And my argument is, yeah, I am going to be back on campus. Today, because of this lecture or this conversation, I stayed at home and I'm in my basement, but typically I go to campus right about, that's why Dr. Dash, I said, it's not that early. I go out to my campus about 7:30 in the morning. It's beautiful, it's nice, it's not that hot by then. I walk around campus, I meet a few students. I don't even go into my office. I sit outside, work on my laptop. And I am starting to get back to that. I'm starting to realize this is the normal that I have to go back to. And, so I'm almost training myself to go back on campus, which is such an odd thing to say. Taught for 27 years at Wake Forest, I've never taught. There'll come a point when I'd say to my wife, who's also at Wake Forest, I'd said to her the other day, I really don't want to get back into the classroom. I love my basement. I wish I could teach from here, which is what you were saying, Dr. Dash, in a way, right? And perhaps we can find that. Perhaps as academics, we can work with the administration, so to speak, and find that point where our teaching might have been better from the basement than in the classroom, right? That is a very awkward thing to say. In the classroom, I may have distractions which I don't have in my basement or in your bedroom or wherever you are. And maybe the teachers gain from, or the students gain from that. Good point, Dr. Dash. You have to get out of the bedroom eventually and move that, that sign that you have behind you. It's a Zoom background, but those days are moving away. And do we want it to move away? Others, any comments, questions?
Yes, I request all of you, all the participants, to drop in your questions, or you may raise your hand. I mean, the virtual hand, I mean. Well, I have one point to mention before we move on to the Q&A session, so is that like this is something that I have felt myself, and I'm pretty sure there would be others who would resonate with this as well, is that, for example, the idea of awkwardness and personal spaces. For example, I do not have a personal room of my own. And while this meeting has been going, somebody or the other has been continuously trying to enter my room because they have to access parts of my room. The same applies to different students as well. So like the problem arises is that I have observed students getting conscious, as well as me while teaching, getting conscious of what's around me and what is disturbing me, so to speak, outside of that zone, outside of that space. So that is another part of awkwardness, that let's say if we can move into a traditional classroom or a conventional classroom wherein the space is a reserved space, we don't have access to anybody else from the outside. So that is another challenge of this online platform, the awkwardness, I would rather say, that we have to deal with. So I was talking to one of my friends who teaches at a B school. So he was saying that they have a mandatory rule that for the students to get the attendance, they have to turn their video on throughout the length of the class. So it occurred to me the problem, the very awkwardness that I was talking about. So I just thought of mentioning it on our
No, so you're right. I remember, I'm not arguing for a pandemic era complete online instruction. That's not my point. I'm not arguing for that. I'm arguing for a hybrid. Again, go back to Archana's example. Hybrid mechanism, which has the goal of this hybrid mechanism is no longer to fight COVID. Everything so far has been fighting COVID, right? So how do we protect us? How do we protect our students? How do we fight COVID? Assume for a second that we will either never be able to fight it, or we will actually be able to do something and make it tolerable for us. Assume that for a second. Then go back to a hybrid model. I'm not denying the fact that, you need to, so you can't teach chemistry 101 online. You can, people have tried that. They had to, they were compelled to, but it didn't work that well. You have to get back into the laboratory. If you are making documentaries, as one of the persons asked, you have to get behind the camera, get your feet wet and take the pictures where you are. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. We should do that. In fact, as soon as the opportunity appears, we should do that. We partly did that in January and February, and we paid the price. But the fact is, also remember what we learned here. The point that you're making, students in the room, two students in the same room, always, this has happened so often during this whole period, or a student at home. And remember, not everybody is privileged enough to have, even a student that's not privileged enough to have his or her own room. This student might actually be taking care of a sibling, might be taking care of elderly family members. I've seen all of this, and they've actually enjoyed it. And look, I can be at home and I can take your class. This is amazing. I could not have done this otherwise. Accommodate for that. That is something that you realize, yes, I know you'll be interrupted, but for that hour, maybe tell somebody that just give me that 1 hour. I'll tell you, again, Ipshita and Shubhinita will recall this. In January and February, when I was in Kolkata, in my house, we were doing some construction work. So literally there was only one space in the entire house that I could call my own, my bedroom, my dining room, everything was in that room, and there was noise all around. And I was doing these webinars. I used to tell the workers that, look, guys, for the next hour, let's not bang things, And so you kind of readjust. And why should we forget that experience? That's my argument. Why do we need to forget that altogether, deny that, and force ourselves to go back to that pre-pandemic?
Thank you. So that was quite an introspective talk. We have some questions here in the chat box. So I'll start with Ms. Ipshita Banerjee asking if there are any alternative teaching methods specific to, let's say, studies in documentary films and outreach programs that one can cope with specifically during this issue.
I would say the alternative teaching methods is, let me go back to her actual question. She put it on there, right? Yeah, Ipshita. Yes. Media studies, documentary session, but the mode of teaching it on, exactly. Is there any alternative teaching methods coming up to cope with this issue? No, not really. I think some of the methods, let's say making a documentary, that's a simple, that's your objective. So to make a documentary, you need to gather footage. that footage gathering has to be done on, cannot be done online. Usually it cannot be, right? Although sometimes with Zoom and stuff that you can do a little bit of that, but that's really not the mechanism. If you're going to do footage gathering, you have to go out there. But then you come back and you start to say the post-production part of it. Post-production is sometimes a collaborative process, right? When you're doing a collaborative post-production, I have done this. Ipshita, you know that video that we put together for our work. That post-production was all done by me on my computer, working with just one other person, and that we can do online. You know, that part can be done online. Then the delivery, then the distribution can be done online. Anything, as my colleague Dr. Hyde says, anything that requires you to be out there, get your hands dirty, get your feet wet, that cannot be done online. And getting your hands dirty is also, Ipshita, you're staying with mass communication, but go beyond that, go outside of your discipline. You cannot do, as a biologist, a dissection of a mouse online. You can do the virtual dissection, you can do that, but you got to get your hands dirty, literally in the blood, right? There, it is not possible. But again, find a hybrid, find the middle point. All I'm saying, don't have to rush back to that point that used to be. Take the learnings and find that hybrid.
Dr. Madhubanti.
Thank you, sir.
My apologies. Dr. Madhubanti asked specific to the concept of digital divide here, specific to the concept of hybrid classrooms, how to deal with that.
Yeah, and I completely appreciate that. I understand that fully because of the fact that I have seen what has been going on in the school systems over the last year, not only in India, but also in the United States. That actually exists across the world. And that is an engineering problem. And what I mean by an engineering problem is simply that it's not a technological thing, but it's a social, technological combined problem. What has been done in some of the lower income, the depressed, the digitally divided part of the US population of particularly K-12, the school kids, is the schools have given out tools. Now that may not be possible in the Indian system. The schools itself might not have the funding to give out the tools. But here's another alternative, and this is why it's an engineering problem. It is possible to do some of this without a very expensive tool. Look at the penetration of things like even a semi-smartphone, even the penetration of things like WhatsApp, and things like that can be leveraged. I'll give you my personal example. When in the March of 2020, I was told that I have to take my existing face-to-face class to its digital, to its online version, I suddenly realized that these kids are at home now. They may not have access to the same kind of computing that they had on campus. So we quickly reverted down, we quickly moved ourselves down to one common platform. And I said, look, if you have a smartphone, can you access WhatsApp? We actually did a part of the semester of March of 2020 by doing WhatsApp discussions. I used to teach with WhatsApp in the sense I would open up the room, I'd open up the group room, I would sit there, I'd start typing some of the questions and the discussion questions, and the students would respond to see each other's responses. And it takes longer, mind, because you're typing right now, okay? Takes longer. But I think the answer to the question is of Dr. Mitra, Madhubanti Mitra, is that you have to find a common, affordable technology platform that will work for that case. Knowing full well that if we continue to do this, the technologies will change, and they have. Think about this technology. How many of you ever heard of Zoom in February of 2020? I bet you nobody ever heard of it. I would say in the next year or so, Zoom would become a word in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, right? Like Google did. And Zoom's, don't forget something that's happened also, which is Zoom has made a shitload of money out of this, pardon the French, but they've made a huge amount of money out of this whole process, right? A lot of people have made a lot of money out of all of this. But to answer Dr. Mitra's question is, I think those problems will have to be addressed. I'm not saying those are not problems, but there may be technological answers to that.
Dr. Prantapratik Patnaik asks, like, for the students specifically, how do they deal with the psychological issues? For example, the headaches that they feel or the eye soreness and pain, etc.
I don't know. I mean, I feel it, you feel it. I'm stuck to the Zoom screen for long periods of time. Those again are mechanisms like Dr. Dash's answer was very good, or not answer, his comment was very good. Typically classes have a little bit of time in between, so take a break. It's much easier to take a break if you're sitting at home, isn't it? You know, you just get up, go outside, like probably Dr. Dash said, from the bedroom, go get a cup of coffee, go get a cup of tea, walk away, control the brightness of the screen and so forth and so on. But yes, I'll tell you guys, summer of 2020, I was in the Senate. I'm still in the Senate, but I got involved with COVID planning for my university. I remember days when my meetings at Wake Forest would start at 9 in the morning and it'd go till 4 in the afternoon. 1 hour, 1.5 hours, all the planning meetings, trying to figure out how to deal with this. It was just fatigue, you know, at the end of that process, it's incredibly fatigue inducing. And here in classes, at least you have the 10 minutes, and this meeting used to be 9 to 10. And then the dean would say, well, you have to be at the 10 to 12 meeting. So literally you're just jumping between Zoom rooms without getting off the chair, right? That's where hybrid comes in. You don't have to do that anymore. You could go off. You could teach something online. You teach something from your bedroom, right? And that's a matter of scheduling, right? Which are the days you're in your bedroom? Which are the days you're in your on that? It's a matter of what your chair says or your department head says. How much of leeway is provided? All of these have to be questioned. All of these have to be rethought. And we are avoiding the rethinking by reverting. Does that make sense? We're taking the easy way out. The easy way out is what we used to know. Let's just go back there. That's what we used to know. We'll go back there. The harder way is to be innovative, to innovate a new mechanism which will give us something else. My doctor said, look at far away for 5 minutes in every half, and rest is one. Okay. Yeah.
That's right, sir. Is there any other question that we can take? It's already 7:32, so we can conclude the session with a vote of thanks. So before we move on to the vote of thanks, I'd really like to thank Professor Mitra here for giving such insightful and introspective thoughts. Like, we had been dealing with it, and while we are still locked down and we don't know when we will be returning to our classroom because of the second wave, and the experts are saying that the third might be just around the corner. So let's just hope for the best, so that the blended future probably is blended.
How far is that corner? How far away is that corner?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I don't know. Around October is what the experts are saying.
Yeah, that's what it is. Because I'm reaching on July 7th, and I'm supposed to leave on August 4th. I'm hoping that corner doesn't come before August 4th. I don't want to get stuck again. I mean, it's okay, but I have to come back and teach face to face, so I have to be back. It's a luxury I had for the entire year so far. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. I'd love to come and see you all at KIIT, and hopefully that'll happen soon.
Thank you so much, sir. So with this, I would like to request Ms. Ruby Nanda to give the vote of thanks. Thank you so much again, sir, for your time.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Perhaps I'm.
Sorry, my apologies. Dr. Anurag Sahu.
Actually, I wanted to make a comment. That is why Souptik remembered my name.
Yes. Please, ma'am. Please go ahead.
I've been listening throughout, sir. What I want to say is that a lot of women would like to go back to the campus. Okay.
Explain that. That's fascinating. That's amazing data. Why? What's the logic behind that?
Sir, the logic behind that, especially in countries where the household duties are lopsided, it is a pleasure to be out working. Actually, for us, working is the only time when we go to office, then we get to sit in the morning. So it is actually a privilege to be in the campus.
Right.
Because now the dinner time is approaching and my kids are waiting. I need to make the chapatis. So that is the whole tension that is not there. So I think this is also a part that needs to be explored. And if we see, then there are a lot of women academicians whose research papers have actually gone down. There have been studies in this. And while counterpart might find it very comfortable, though of course staying with your kids and being able to look after your household is definitely a plus point, but academically it is not uh, as fruitful, I feel.
And if I may respond to that, just I know you're going over time, but if I might respond to that, I'm completely agree with you, Dr. Nanda. You know, it is exactly the process that's happening, not only in academics, it's happening in all across the board, all across the board. I know of people, again, it's since there is no real data, we look at ethnographic data or narrative, anecdotal data. I know of a family where the woman is having to find a mechanism of leaving the home to go to another safe place to do the work. And it's not an academic work, it's other kind of work, because of this being stuck in that space with a child and with all of the household stuff going on. But my point for you would be, as an academic, I have, again, as I have said, there's no difficulty. I have no hesitancy in going back to my office. My hesitancy is having to be compelled to go back into the classroom. There's a huge difference between the office and the classroom. The purposes are different. I think a classroom can be rethought. I'm not saying, I mean, I don't want Wake Forest to take my office away. You know, I need that office. So that's a very interesting tension that you're pointing out. Yeah, but working from home for women, not only just India, I've seen this in my colleagues over here at Wake. For the women, it becomes much more of a challenge, especially if there are children at home who are also online, constantly doing schoolwork.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. It goes through the academics, university, the functionalities and all. And the topic, when I first came across the topic, it was interesting. And actually, I can say the discussion was also interesting. It was very much a participatory nature. You narrated the story, how this pandemic had started and how all of a sudden you became disconnected from the students and how online classes started, and how experience to accept the new normal of life, and the story of every teacher during this pandemic, and how teachers to encroach the freedom and comfortable zone of students. And this is something which is related to everybody who are directly or indirectly involved in the process of teaching and learning. And we should learn something out of it. And we should not jump out to the conclusion. We should accept the new normal, and we should take it positively. We should learn the things. Certainly, we would look forward to the objective of this entire process. And as you rightly pointed out, the hybrid type of teaching learning is what is the requirement of, of this time. And on behalf of KIIT School of Mass Communication, we are thankful to all the participants who attended successfully, who attended all the sessions, categorically, particularly this session. And we're also thankful to our founder, Professor Achyuta Samanta, for his support and encouragement to organize the series of FDP every year, like this year. And we're also thankful to our CEO, Professor Himanshu Khatua, for the constant encouragement and inspiration to materialize this type of program. And at the last, I would like to have a request. If the things will be normal in the near future, we will be glad to invite you to our campus, to have a visit to our campus and to interact with our students, if things will be normal in the future. And thank you so much for the input, sir.
Yeah, looking forward. Yeah.